All around the world, there are ancient places hidden under fields, hills, and oceans, built by people who had no machines, no modern tools, and no written plans, yet somehow created monuments that still confuse scientists today. From stone circles and underground chambers to forgotten cities and ceremonial centers, these structures show that early humans understood engineering, astronomy, and organization far better than we often realize. In this video, we explore the most mysterious prehistoric sites on Earth, uncover how they were built, why they mattered, and what secrets they may still be hiding. This is the story of civilization before history was written. Kerkado Passage. Grave and the earliest architecture of memory. On the western edge of France, near the town of Carnac in Brittany, where the landscape opens into gentle hills, open fields, and distant views of the Atlantic coast, there stands a small grassy mound that most people would never notice unless they were specifically looking for it. Yet beneath this modest surface lies one of the oldest known stone burial monuments in Europe, a structure built more than 6,000 years ago by early farming communities who were beginning to experiment with permanent architecture, ritual space, and long-term memory preservation, a monument now known as the Kerkado Passage Grave. When the people who built Kerkado lived in this region around 4,800 BCE, Europe was undergoing a profound transformation, as groups that had once moved seasonally in search of food were slowly learning how to settle in one place, cultivate crops, raise animals, and organize their lives around stable communities, rather than constant movement. And this shift toward permanent settlement required new ways of thinking about land ownership, family identity, social cooperation, and the relationship between the living and the dead. These early farmers lived in simple houses made from wood, clay, and plant fibers, surrounded by small fields of wheat and barley and grazing areas for cattle and sheep. And their daily lives were shaped by weather patterns, soil conditions, animal behavior, and seasonal cycles that demanded careful observation and collective planning in order to survive. At the same time, they were developing increasingly complex belief systems that attempted to explain natural phenomena, human mortality, and the continuity of life across generations. And one of the ways they expressed these beliefs was through the construction of monumental burial structures that transformed death into a public, communal, and permanent feature of the landscape, rather than a private or temporary event. Kerkado represents one of the earliest and most refined examples of this new way of thinking, because instead of burying individuals in shallow graves or simple pits, its builders created a carefully engineered stone passage leading into a central chamber, covered by a massive mound of earth and rock that protected the interior space and symbolically separated it from the everyday world outside. The passage itself was built from large granite slabs quarried from nearby outcrops, transported across uneven ground using wooden rollers, ropes, and human labor, and then positioned with remarkable precision so that they formed straight walls and stable ceilings without the use of mortar, metal tools, or mechanical lifting devices, demonstrating that these communities possessed advanced practical knowledge of physics, balance, and material behavior long before formal science existed. Inside the burial chamber, archaeologists have found human remains, pottery fragments, stone tools, and ritual objects that indicate repeated use over many generations, showing that Kerkado was not created for a single individual or family, but served as a collective ancestral space where the dead were integrated into ongoing social life through ceremony, remembrance, and periodic visitation. One of the most remarkable features of Kerkado is its alignment with astronomical events, particularly the rising sun during certain times of the year, which sends light through the narrow passage and into the chamber, illuminating the interior space in a controlled and meaningful way, suggesting that the builders observed celestial cycles over long periods and incorporated this knowledge into architectural design in order to connect burial rituals with cosmic order. This alignment required careful measurement of horizon points, seasonal variation, and solar movement, knowledge that could only be accumulated through patient observation across generations and passed down orally within families. And ritual specialists. The location of Kerkado within the wider Carnac landscape further emphasizes its symbolic importance, because it stands close to thousands of standing stones arranged in long rows, stone circles, and alignments that together form one of the largest prehistoric ceremonial complexes in the world, indicating that this region functioned as a major spiritual and cultural center for Neolithic communities across Western Europe. These monuments were not isolated creations, but parts of a coordinated system of sacred geography that linked burial practices, seasonal rituals, territorial identity, and social cohesion into a unified worldview expressed through stone and earth. Building Kerkado required the cooperation of dozens, and possibly hundreds, of people over extended periods of time, involving quarrying, transport, shaping, placement, mound construction, and ritual supervision, which in turn implies organized leadership, shared goals, conflict resolution mechanisms, and long-term planning abilities that challenge outdated assumptions about prehistoric societies being simple or disorganized. Environmental studies show that during Kerkado's construction, the Brittany region enjoyed relatively mild and stable climatic conditions, with mixed woodland, open grassland, and coastal resources that supported farming, fishing, and trade, allowing communities to generate food surpluses that freed some members to focus on construction, ritual, and specialized crafts. Trade networks connected these people to distant regions, bringing in materials such as jadeite axes from the Alps, shells from the Atlantic coast, and flint from inland sources, demonstrating that ideas and technologies circulated widely and helped standardize architectural and symbolic traditions. Over time, as belief systems evolved and new monument types emerged, Kerkado gradually lost its central role. Yet it was never abandoned or destroyed, because later generations continued to recognize it as a place of ancestral power, incorporating it into local folklore, territorial memory, and spiritual imagination. Modern archaeological research using radiocarbon dating, microscopic wear analysis, soil chemistry, and digital reconstruction has allowed scholars to reconstruct construction phases, usage patterns, and social organization with increasing accuracy. Yet many fundamental questions remain unresolved, including how ritual authority was established, how knowledge was preserved without writing, and how social cohesion was maintained over centuries. Walking into the passage today, as sunlight filters slowly along ancient stone walls and cool air surrounds the visitor, it becomes clear that Kerkado was designed not simply as a container for bones, but as a carefully staged experience that guided perception, emotion, and thought, transforming physical movement into spiritual reflection. Kerkado ultimately reminds us that long before humans built cities, empires, or written histories, they were already capable of abstract thought, long-term planning, symbolic communication, and collective memory, and that through monuments like this, they attempted to answer the deepest questions of existence using only stone, earth, observation, and imagination. It stands as one of humanity's earliest efforts to give form to invisible ideas, to make memory permanent, and to ensure that individual lives would remain connected to something larger and more enduring than themselves. Los Millares and the birth of organized defense. In the dry river valleys of southeastern Spain, near the modern city of Almeria, where rugged hills meet open plains and seasonal rivers carve shallow paths through the landscape, there lies the extensive archaeological site of Los Millares, a fortified settlement that represents one of the earliest and most sophisticated examples of organized community, defense, social hierarchy, and planned urban life in prehistoric Europe. Founded around 3200 BCE during the Copper Age, Los Millares emerged at a time when human societies were undergoing major changes driven by new technologies, expanding trade networks, population growth, and increasing competition over land and resources, all of which placed new pressures on traditional village life and required new forms of cooperation and protection. Unlike earlier farming communities that relied mainly on natural barriers and informal social bonds for security, the people of Los Millares constructed a massive system of stone walls, bastions, gates, and watchtowers that surrounded their settlement, creating multiple defensive rings that controlled access and protected inhabitants from external threats. The outer walls extended for hundreds of meters and were reinforced by semicircular towers placed at strategic intervals, allowing defenders to observe approaching groups and coordinate responses long before attackers could reach the settlement itself. Inside these fortifications lay a carefully organized town consisting of stone houses, storage areas, workshops, and communal spaces arranged along narrow pathways that facilitated movement, trade, and social interaction, while also allowing defenders to respond quickly in case of danger. The placement of buildings reflects deliberate planning rather than spontaneous growth, indicating that leadership structures and communal decision-making processes guided urban development over many generations. One of the most significant aspects of Los Millares is its connection to early metallurgy, particularly the production and use of copper tools and ornaments, which gave this period its name and transformed economic and social relationships throughout the region. Archaeologists have discovered furnaces, slag remains, molds, and metal objects within the settlement, showing that skilled specialists were extracting and shaping copper from nearby mineral sources, creating axes, knives, awls, and decorative items that increased agricultural efficiency, craft production, and personal status. Control over metal production and distribution likely played a central role in establishing social hierarchies, as those who managed resources, trade routes, and skilled labor gained influence and authority within the community. Surrounding the fortified town lies a vast necropolis containing more than 100 collective tombs, including tholoi, or circular stone burial chambers with long passages, which served as family or clan burial spaces over multiple generations. These tombs contain pottery, stone tools, ivory objects, beads, and metal items, indicating that social identity, wealth, and status continued to matter after death and were publicly displayed through burial practices. The relationship between the living settlement and the surrounding necropolis reveals a deeply integrated worldview in which ancestors, territory, and social memory were interconnected, reinforcing group identity and continuity. Environmental studies show that Los Millares was strategically located near water sources, fertile land, and mineral deposits, allowing its inhabitants to combine farming, herding, mining, and trade into a resilient economic system capable of supporting a large population. Trade networks linked the settlement to regions across Iberia, North Africa, and possibly even the Eastern Mediterranean, as evidenced by imported materials such as ivory, exotic stones, and distinctive pottery. Styles, demonstrating that Los Millares was part of a much wider cultural and economic world. These long-distance connections not only moved goods, but also transmitted ideas, technologies, and social practices that influenced local development. The complexity of Los Millares suggests that leadership had become more formalized than in earlier villages, with certain individuals or groups likely responsible for coordinating defense, organizing labor, managing trade, and overseeing ritual activities. Although no written records survive, variations in house size, burial goods, and access to resources indicate emerging social stratification and inequality, marking an important stage in the development of complex societies. Conflict appears to have been a significant factor in shaping life at Los Millares, as the scale and sophistication of its fortifications imply real and persistent threats from rival groups competing for land, water, and metal resources. These conflicts may have involved raiding, territorial disputes, and control over trade routes, reflecting a world in which cooperation and competition existed side by side. Despite its strength and organization, Los Millares eventually declined around 2200 BCE, possibly due to climate change, resource depletion, social unrest, or shifts in regional power structures, leading to gradual abandonment rather than sudden collapse. As populations moved and new cultural traditions emerged, the fortified town was left behind, slowly returning to the landscape as wind and rain covered its walls and houses with soil and vegetation. Modern archaeological research using aerial photography, geophysical surveys, and material analysis has revealed the full scale of the site and continues to uncover new details about daily life, production systems, and social relationships. Yet many questions remain unanswered. How authority was maintained, how conflicts were resolved, how knowledge was transmitted, and how communities balanced cooperation with competition. Walking through the ruins today, among weathered stones and eroded walls, visitors can still sense the careful planning and collective effort that once sustained this settlement, reminding us that long before formal states and armies existed, humans were already experimenting with defense, governance, and organized urban living. Los Millares shows that the roots of cities, social hierarchy, and political power stretch deep into prehistory, and that the challenges of security, inequality, and resource management have been part of human experience for thousands of years. It stands as a powerful reminder that civilization was not born suddenly, but slowly constructed through countless decisions, struggles, and shared ambitions, carved into stone and preserved across time. Dar Tichit and the stone cities of the ancient Sahara. In the high plateaus of southeastern Mauritania, where rocky ridges rise above vast sandy plains and dry winds sweep endlessly across the landscape, there exists a network of ruined stone settlements that seem completely out of place in today's harsh desert environment. Yet these remains belong to one of the earliest and most organized urban traditions in West Africa, a civilization that flourished thousands of years ago in a region that was once far greener and more hospitable than it is now, known collectively as the Dar Tichit stone settlements. When the people of Dar Tichit began building permanent communities around 2000 BCE, the Sahara had not yet fully transformed into the arid desert seen today. And although rainfall was already declining, seasonal grasses, shallow lakes, and scattered vegetation still supported farming and herding populations who learned to adapt to increasingly unpredictable conditions. These early inhabitants selected elevated plateaus and ridges for their settlements, choosing locations that offered natural protection from flooding, wide views of surrounding territory, and access to nearby grazing lands and water sources, demonstrating careful environmental awareness and long-term planning. Using flat sandstone slabs collected from nearby outcrops, they constructed rectangular houses, storage buildings, courtyards, and perimeter walls through dry stone masonry techniques that required precise stacking and balancing without mortar, allowing structures to remain stable despite temperature extremes and shifting ground. Many settlements followed consistent layouts, with clustered residential areas, central open spaces, and designated storage zones, indicating shared architectural traditions and coordinated community planning rather than random individual construction. Archaeological surveys have identified hundreds of such sites distributed across the Dar Tichit, Tar, Walata, and Tar Nema regions, forming a dense network of interconnected communities that likely shared political authority, economic systems, and cultural identity. Agriculture formed the foundation of life in these settlements, with evidence showing early domestication and cultivation of pearl millet, one of Africa's most important grain crops, which provided reliable food even in semi-arid conditions and allowed communities to store surplus harvests for periods of drought. Stone-built granaries protected grain from pests, moisture, and heat, enabling long-term food security and supporting population growth, craft specialization, and social complexity. Alongside farming, inhabitants practiced pastoralism, herding cattle, goats, and sheep across seasonal grazing zones, and integrating animal products into their diet, economy, and ritual practices. This mixed subsistence strategy reduced dependence on any single resource and increased resilience to environmental fluctuations. Trade networks linked Dar Tichit settlements with distant regions across the Sahel, Niger River Valley, and North African trade corridors, as shown by the presence of imported beads, shells, metals, and distinctive ceramics, indicating participation in early trans-Saharan exchange systems. Through these networks, ideas about technology, social organization, and belief systems circulated widely, helping maintain cultural continuity across large territories. Social structure within Dar Tichit. Communities appears to have been increasingly hierarchical over time, with some settlements growing larger and more fortified than others, suggesting the emergence of regional centers that exercised political and economic influence over surrounding villages. Differences in house size, storage capacity, and burial goods indicate unequal access to resources and rising social stratification. Defensive features such as perimeter walls, Elevated positions and controlled entrances suggest awareness of conflict and competition, possibly arising from pressure on land, water, and trade routes as environmental conditions worsened. Despite these challenges, Dar-Tichit societies maintained stability for many centuries through adaptive strategies, cooperative labor, and flexible resource management. Ritual life was closely integrated with daily activity, as indicated by symbolic objects, special structures, and patterned spatial organization within settlements, suggesting that spiritual beliefs guided agricultural cycles, leadership authority, and social norms. Although no written records survive, oral traditions and material culture point toward complex systems of knowledge transmission that preserved farming techniques, architectural practices, and social customs across generations. Beginning around 1000 BCE, prolonged droughts and desert expansion gradually undermined the ecological foundations of Dar-Tichit life, reducing agricultural productivity, shrinking grazing areas, and forcing communities to migrate southward toward more reliable water sources. Rather than collapsing suddenly, these societies slowly relocated, carrying their cultural traditions, farming knowledge, and social structures into the Niger River region, where they likely contributed to the development of later West African civilizations. Modern archaeological research using satellite imagery, carbon dating, landscape modeling, and comparative analysis continues to reveal new sites and refine chronologies. Yet many fundamental questions remain unresolved. How leadership operated across dispersed settlements, how conflicts were mediated, how long-distance trade was regulated, and how environmental knowledge was shared. Walking among the ruins today, visitors see low stone walls half buried in sand, silent testimony to communities that once thrived in a now hostile environment, reminding us that climate change and environmental transformation have shaped human history for thousands of years. Dar-Tichit demonstrates that complex societies can emerge in unexpected places and that human adaptability, cooperation, and innovation can sustain civilization even under challenging conditions. It stands as one of Africa's earliest examples of urban planning, agricultural management, and regional integration, offering powerful insight into how ancient peoples responded creatively to environmental uncertainty. Sesklo and the rise of Europe's first towns. In the fertile plains of Thessaly in central Greece, where rivers flow gently from surrounding mountains and rich soil supports abundant agriculture, there lies the archaeological site of Sesklo, a Neolithic settlement that represents one of the earliest and most important examples of organized town life in Europe, revealing how human communities first learned to live together in large, permanent, and carefully structured settlements. When people began settling at Sesklo around 6500 BCE, Europe was still largely inhabited by small groups of hunter-gatherers who moved seasonally in search of food, while farming communities were only beginning to spread westward from Anatolia and the Near East, bringing with them domesticated plants, animals, and new ways of organizing daily life. The settlers of Sesklo were among the first in Europe to adopt full-scale agriculture, cultivating wheat, barley, lentils, and peas, while raising sheep, goats, and cattle, allowing them to produce stable food supplies and support growing populations without relying on constant movement. This agricultural foundation made permanent settlement possible and encouraged the development of long-term planning, property concepts, and social cooperation. Unlike earlier villages composed of loosely scattered huts, Sesklo developed into a densely populated town with stone and mud brick houses arranged along organized pathways and clustered around central open spaces, showing deliberate planning and communal coordination. Many houses were rectangular in shape, built on stone foundations with mud brick walls and plastered interiors, reflecting both practical engineering knowledge and concern for comfort, cleanliness, and durability. Some buildings were larger and more elaborately constructed than others, possibly serving as communal halls, storage centers, or residences for leaders, indicating emerging social differentiation and institutional organization. Excavations have revealed hearths, ovens, grinding stones, storage jars, and weaving tools inside homes, providing detailed insight into daily life and household economies, where food preparation, textile production, tool making, and child rearing took place within tightly knit family units. Pottery production at Sesklo reached remarkable levels of sophistication, with finely crafted vessels decorated in red and white geometric patterns that became widely imitated across southeastern Europe, suggesting that Sesklo functioned as a cultural center influencing surrounding regions. These ceramics were not merely practical objects, but carriers of identity, aesthetic values, and social communication. Trade networks connected Sesklo to distant areas, as shown by the presence of obsidian from the island of Melos, exotic stones, and specialized tools, demonstrating participation in early regional exchange systems that transmitted materials, ideas, and techniques. Such networks strengthened social ties between communities and reduced isolation. Social life at Sesklo appears to have been organized around extended families and cooperative labor groups, with shared responsibility for farming, construction, and ritual activities, while leadership likely emerged through experience, skill, and social trust rather than formal political institutions. Religious practices were integrated into domestic and communal spaces, as indicated by figurines, symbolic objects, and special deposits found within houses and courtyards, reflecting beliefs focused on fertility, protection, ancestry, and seasonal cycles. One of the most striking features of Sesklo is the evidence of defensive structures, including perimeter walls and controlled entrances, suggesting that even early farming communities faced competition and occasional conflict over land and resources, requiring organized responses and collective security. These fortifications also reinforced social boundaries and group identity. Environmental studies show that Thessaly offered ideal conditions for early agriculture, with reliable rainfall, fertile soils, and diverse ecosystems, yet maintaining productivity required careful land management, crop rotation, and cooperation among households. Over time, population growth placed increasing pressure on resources, leading to changes in settlement patterns and social organization. Around 4400 BCE, Sesklo declined and was eventually abandoned, possibly due to environmental stress, social tensions, competition from neighboring communities, or shifts in regional trade networks, though no single cause has been definitively identified. Some evidence suggests episodes of destruction by fire, indicating possible conflict or internal upheaval. Despite its decline, Sesklo's cultural influence persisted through successor communities and related traditions, shaping the development of later Neolithic societies across the Balkans and Aegean region. Modern archaeological research using stratigraphic analysis, radiocarbon dating, and material studies continues to refine understanding of Sesklo's development. Yet many important questions remain unanswered. How leadership was maintained, how disputes were resolved, how knowledge was transmitted, and how cooperation was sustained over centuries. Walking through the reconstructed foundations today, visitors can imagine the dense network of homes, workshops, and courtyards that once filled this hillside, alive with voices, smoke from hearths, and the rhythms of daily labor. Sesklo reminds us that towns did not emerge suddenly with kings and walls, but grew slowly from shared effort, agricultural stability, and collective imagination. It represents one of humanity's earliest experiments in large-scale community living, where people learned to balance individual households with communal responsibility, laying the groundwork for future cities and civilizations. Cahokia, and the civilization that mastered the earth. Along the wide floodplains of the Mississippi River, in what is now the central United States, where rich soils are renewed each year by seasonal flooding and vast skies stretch endlessly above open landscapes, there once rose the largest and most complex urban center north of Mexico before European contact, a city built almost entirely from earth, shaped by human hands over centuries, known today as Cahokia. Located near present-day St. Louis, Cahokia flourished between approximately 1050 and 1350 CE, during a period when much of North America was inhabited by farming villages and tribal communities. Yet this region developed into a true metropolitan center containing tens of thousands of people, monumental architecture, hierarchical governance, long-distance trade networks, and a sophisticated religious and political system. At its peak, Cahokia covered more than 15 square kilometers and contained over 100 earthen mounds arranged in carefully planned patterns that reflected cosmological beliefs, social order, and political authority, forming a landscape that was both functional and deeply symbolic. The most impressive of these structures, known as Monk's Mound, rises more than 30 meters high and covers an area larger than many ancient pyramids, making it the largest prehistoric earthwork in the Americas, constructed entirely through the repeated transport and placement of baskets filled with soil and clay by human labor. Building Monk's Mound required millions of loads of earth to be carried, shaped, compacted, and stabilized, demanding extraordinary levels of organization, coordination, and leadership sustained across multiple generations. Atop this massive platform stood large wooden structures that likely served as temples, palaces, or ceremonial centers, where political and religious leaders exercised authority and conducted rituals that reinforced social hierarchy and cosmic order. Surrounding the central mound complex lay dense residential neighborhoods, workshops, agricultural fields, and satellite communities, forming an integrated urban system that depended on careful resource management and regional cooperation. Cahokia's economy was based on intensive maize agriculture, supplemented by fishing, hunting, and gathering, which allowed the city to support large populations and specialized craftspeople, priests, traders, and administrators. Archaeological evidence shows that Cahokians engineered drainage systems, leveled terraces, and managed floodwaters to protect crops and settlements, demonstrating deep environmental knowledge and landscape manipulation skills. Trade networks extended across much of North America, bringing in copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf Coast, mica from the Appalachians, and exotic stones from distant regions, showing that Cahokia functioned as a major hub in continental exchange systems. These materials were transformed into ceremonial objects, ornaments, and status symbols that reinforced elite power and spiritual authority. Religious life at Cahokia centered on a complex belief system often referred to as the Southeastern Ceremonial Complex, which linked celestial cycles, ancestral spirits, fertility rituals, and political leadership into a unified worldview expressed through iconography, architecture, and performance. One of the most striking features of this system is Woodhenge, a series of large circular arrangements of wooden posts used to track solar movements and mark solstices and equinoxes, demonstrating precise astronomical observation and integration of cosmology into urban planning. Social organization at Cahokia was highly stratified, with elites occupying elevated areas near major mounds, while commoners lived in surrounding neighborhoods, reflecting unequal access to resources, power, and ritual spaces. Burial practices reinforce this hierarchy, as elite tombs contain elaborate grave goods, sacrificial victims, and ceremonial artifacts, while ordinary burials are simpler and more uniform. Environmental and demographic pressures gradually undermined Cahokia's stability, as deforestation, soil exhaustion, flooding, and resource competition strained agricultural productivity and social cohesion. Evidence of increased violence, fortification construction, and population movement suggests growing instability during the city's later phases. Around 1350 CE, Cahokia experienced rapid decline and was largely abandoned, possibly due to a combination of climate change, political fragmentation, disease, and economic disruption, though no single explanation fully accounts for its collapse. Later, Native American groups preserved memories of Cahokia in oral traditions, recognizing the area as a place of ancestral power and spiritual significance. Modern archaeological research using remote sensing, geochemical analysis, and bioarchaeology continues to uncover new insights into Cahokian life, yet many important questions remain unresolved. How leadership functioned, how decisions were enforced, how knowledge was transmitted, and how such a vast city was sustained without writing or metal tools. Walking among the mounds today, as grass waves in the wind and shadows move slowly across ancient earthworks, visitors can sense the immense human effort embedded in every layer of soil. Cahokia demonstrates that civilization does not require stone pyramids or metal monuments to achieve greatness, but can emerge through collective labor, environmental mastery, and shared belief expressed through the very ground beneath our feet. It stands as one of humanity's most remarkable examples of landscape engineering and social organization, reminding us that complex urban societies have arisen independently in many parts of the world, shaped by local environments, creativity, and ambition. Jericho and the first architects of humanity. In the deep Jordan Valley, far below sea level, where natural springs rise from limestone hills and sustain life in an otherwise harsh desert environment, there stands one of the oldest continuously inhabited places on Earth, a settlement whose origins stretch back more than 10,000 years, and whose earliest builders laid the foundations for organized architecture, urban planning, and collective construction long before written history began, a place known as Jericho. Long before pyramids were raised in Egypt or cities emerged in Mesopotamia, small communities gathered around Jericho's reliable water sources, forming a stable population center at a time when most humans still lived as mobile hunter-gatherers, moving seasonally in search of food and shelter. Around 9000 BCE, during the pre-pottery Neolithic period, the inhabitants of Jericho began constructing monumental structures that had never before appeared in human history, including a massive stone wall and a towering circular structure now known as the Jericho Tower, marking the earliest known example of large-scale communal architecture. The wall, measuring several meters in thickness and height, surrounded the settlement and required the quarrying, transport, and placement of thousands of tons of stone, while the tower rose more than 8 meters tall and contained an internal staircase carved directly into its stone mass, demonstrating advanced engineering knowledge and coordinated labor on an unprecedented scale. These constructions were built without metal tools, wheeled vehicles, draft animals, or written plans, relying entirely on human strength, oral communication, and accumulated practical knowledge passed down through generations. Archaeologists have long debated the purpose of these early structures, with some suggesting that the wall functioned as a defense against hostile groups, others proposing that it served as protection against seasonal flooding, and still others arguing that it was primarily symbolic, representing social unity, territorial identity, and collective authority. The tower's function is even more mysterious, as its precise alignment with the setting sun during the summer solstice suggests that it may have served as an astronomical observation point or ceremonial marker linking community life to seasonal cycles. Inside early Jericho, tightly packed mud brick houses formed dense neighborhoods organized around shared courtyards and pathways, reflecting cooperative living arrangements and collective responsibility for maintenance, sanitation, and food storage. These homes contained hearths, grinding stones, storage jars, and workspaces that supported daily activities such as food preparation, tool making, textile production, and childcare, providing a detailed picture of early settled life. Agriculture formed the foundation of Jericho's economy, with inhabitants cultivating wheat, barley, and legumes while domesticating animals such as goats and sheep, allowing them to produce food surpluses that supported population growth and labor specialization. The emergence of surplus production made it possible for some community members to focus on construction, ritual leadership, and administrative tasks, laying the groundwork for social differentiation. One of the most remarkable cultural practices at Jericho was the creation of plastered skulls, in which selected human skulls were coated with plaster and decorated with shells to recreate facial features, then displayed in homes or ceremonial spaces, revealing complex beliefs about ancestry, identity, and spiritual continuity. This tradition indicates that the living maintained close symbolic relationships with their dead, integrating ancestors into daily social and spiritual life. Jericho's location at the crossroads of major migration and trade routes linking Africa, Asia, and Europe facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies, helping spread agricultural practices and architectural concepts across the wider region. Obsidian, shells, pigments, and exotic stones found at the site testified to long-distance connections that extended hundreds of kilometers. Over thousands of years, Jericho experienced repeated cycles of expansion, destruction, abandonment, and rebuilding, with each generation constructing new buildings atop the remains of earlier ones, gradually forming a layered mound that preserves a continuous record of human adaptation and innovation. Environmental changes, including shifts in rainfall patterns and temperature, periodically challenged agricultural productivity and settlement stability, forcing inhabitants to adjust farming methods and social organization. Modern archaeological research using radiocarbon dating, geophysical surveys, and digital modeling continues to reveal new insights into Jericho's early development, yet many fundamental questions remain unanswered. How leadership emerged, how labor was coordinated, how conflicts were managed, and how technical knowledge was preserved without writing. Walking through the ruins today, visitors encounter massive stone blocks and eroded walls that still testify to the ambition and cooperation of humanity's earliest builders. Jericho demonstrates that architecture was not invented by kings or empires, but by ordinary people who learned to work together, plan for the future, and transform natural environments into shared living spaces. It represents the moment when humans first became architects of their own destiny, shaping not only shelters, but societies, traditions, and civilizations that would continue to evolve for thousands of years. Menga and the monument older than legends. In the broad fertile valley of Antequera in southern Spain, surrounded by distant mountains and open plains shaped by thousands of years of farming and settlement, there stands a massive stone structure that appears simple from the outside yet reveals astonishing complexity and ambition once entered. A monument built long before written history, long before recorded myths, and long before most of the civilizations that later dominated Europe, known today as the Dolmen of Menga. Constructed around 3700 BCE during the Neolithic period, Menga represents one of the largest and most technically advanced megalithic tombs in Europe, a structure that challenges modern assumptions about what prehistoric societies were capable of achieving with limited tools and technology. Unlike many other passage graves that focus primarily on narrow corridors and small chambers, Menga was designed on a monumental scale with a wide entrance, massive interior, space, and enormous roof slabs that weigh more than 100 tons each, making their transport and placement one of the greatest engineering achievements of prehistoric Europe. The builders of Menga quarried these gigantic stones from nearby limestone outcrops, carefully shaped them using stone and wooden tools, transported them across uneven terrain, and raised them into position using earthen ramps, wooden scaffolding, ropes, and coordinated human labor, demonstrating advanced knowledge of leverage, balance, and structural stability. Inside the dolmen, visitors enter a long corridor that gradually opens into a large central chamber supported by massive vertical pillars, creating an interior space that feels more like a stone hall than a simple tomb, suggesting that Menga served not only as a burial place, but also as a ceremonial gathering space for communal rituals and social events. One of Menga's most unusual features is its orientation, which does not align with solar events as many other megalithic monuments do, but instead points directly toward La Peña de los Enamorados, a nearby mountain whose profile resembles a human face, and which was likely considered sacred by local communities. This alignment indicates that natural landmarks played a central role in spiritual geography, and that mountains, rivers, and distinctive landforms were integrated into religious belief systems alongside celestial phenomena. Archaeological excavations inside Menga have uncovered human remains, pottery, stone tools, and symbolic objects that indicate repeated use over many generations, reflecting long-term continuity of ritual practices and strong ancestral traditions. The arrangement of bones and grave goods suggests collective burial rather than individual memorialization, emphasizing group identity and lineage over personal status. One of the most remarkable technical features of Menga is its system of interior pillars, which were added to support the immense roof slabs and prevent collapse, showing that builders recognized structural limits and adapted designs accordingly through experimentation and experience. This represents one of the earliest known examples of architectural problem-solving in large-scale stone construction. Environmental studies show that the Antequera region offered fertile soils, reliable water sources, and favorable climate conditions that supported dense farming populations capable of sustaining large labor forces over extended construction periods. Agricultural surpluses made it possible to organize massive communal projects without threatening basic survival. Trade networks connected Menga's builders to distant regions, bringing in exotic materials such as obsidian, jadeite, and marine shells, demonstrating that these communities participated in wide cultural exchange systems. These networks also facilitated the spread of architectural ideas and ritual traditions across Europe. Social organization at Menga appears to have involved coordinated leadership and shared ritual authority, with certain individuals or groups responsible for overseeing construction, ceremonies, and knowledge transmission. Although no written records survive, consistent building techniques and symbolic patterns suggest formalized training and cultural continuity. Over time, as belief systems evolved and new monument types emerged, Menga gradually lost its central ceremonial role, yet it remained respected and preserved through oral tradition and local memory. Later cultures recognized its significance and avoided disturbing it, allowing it to survive into modern times. Modern archaeological research using laser scanning, structural analysis, and residue testing continues to uncover new details about Menga's construction and use. Yet many questions remain unresolved. How rituals were conducted, how leadership operated, how knowledge was preserved, and how such massive projects were sustained over generations. Walking into Menga today, as light filters slowly through the entrance and shadows move across ancient stone surfaces, visitors often experience a powerful sense of continuity with distant ancestors who gathered in this same space thousands of years ago. Menga reminds us that prehistoric monuments were not crude or primitive constructions, but carefully planned, technically sophisticated, and culturally meaningful creations that embodied complex understandings of nature, society, and the human place within the universe. It stands as a testament to humanity's early capacity for imagination, cooperation, and long-term vision, showing that even before legends were written, people were already shaping landscapes with ideas that would endure for millennia. Chirand and the roots of early civilization in eastern India. On the northern plains of India, where the Ganges river system spreads fertile soil across wide agricultural landscapes, and seasonal floods renew the land year after year, there lies a quiet archaeological site near the village of Chirand, in present-day Bihar, that preserves one of the oldest continuous records of settled human life in South Asia, revealing how early communities in this region transformed hunting and gathering traditions into organized agricultural societies long before recorded history began. Located near the confluence of the Ganga, Gagara, and Sone rivers, Chirand occupies a strategic position within one of the most productive ecological zones in the Indian subcontinent, where abundant water, rich alluvial soil, and diverse plant and animal life created ideal conditions for early settlement and long-term stability. Archaeological excavations show that people began living at Chirand as early as 4000 BCE, initially as semi-nomadic groups who combined hunting, fishing, and gathering with early forms of cultivation, gradually transitioning into fully sedentary farming communities over many centuries. These early inhabitants built circular and rectangular huts using bamboo, wood, mud, and reeds, arranging them in clustered patterns that reflected kinship networks and cooperative labor systems, while open spaces were reserved for communal activities, food processing, and ritual gatherings. Evidence of hearths, storage pits, and work areas within these dwellings provides detailed insight into daily life, showing how families prepared food, crafted tools, raised children, and managed shared resources within closely connected neighborhoods. Agriculture formed the foundation of Chirand's economy, with inhabitants cultivating rice, wheat, barley, and pulses, while domesticating cattle, goats, and pigs, creating a mixed subsistence system that balanced crop production with animal husbandry and seasonal fishing along nearby rivers. Stone tools, bone implements, and later copper objects discovered at the site indicate gradual technological development, reflecting experimentation, adaptation, and increasing specialization among craftspeople. One of Chiran's most remarkable features is its extensive evidence of bone tool production, including needles, awls, fishhooks, and ornaments made from animal remains, demonstrating high levels of skill and resource efficiency in utilizing available materials. Pottery at Chiran evolved from simple handmade vessels to more refined and decorated forms, reflecting changes in cooking practices, storage methods, and social customs over time. Trade networks connected Chiran to neighboring regions of the Gangetic Plain and beyond, as indicated by the presence of non-local stones, shells, and metal objects, showing that early Eastern Indian communities were already part of wider exchange systems. These networks facilitated not only material movement, but also the spread of agricultural knowledge, technological innovations, and cultural traditions. Social organization at Chiran appears to have been based on extended families and cooperative groups, with leadership emerging through experience, ritual authority, and resource management rather than formal political institutions. Burial practices and symbolic objects suggest beliefs centered on fertility, ancestry, and natural forces, reflecting close relationships between spiritual life and environmental cycles. Environmental studies reveal that Chiran's inhabitants carefully adapted to seasonal flooding and shifting river courses by adjusting settlement layouts, crop choices, and construction methods, demonstrating sophisticated ecological knowledge. This adaptability allowed the community to persist through changing climatic conditions for thousands of years. Over time, Chiran developed into a major cultural center that influenced surrounding regions, contributing to the formation of later Chalcolithic and early historic cultures of eastern India. Its long occupational sequence provides rare insight into gradual social evolution rather than sudden cultural replacement. Modern archaeological research using radiocarbon dating, microbotanical analysis, and residue studies continues to uncover new information about diet, trade, and daily practices. Yet many questions remain unanswered. How authority was maintained, how conflicts were resolved, how knowledge was transmitted, and how traditions were preserved without writing. Walking through the excavated layers today, visitors can see traces of hearths, post holes, and ancient floors that testify to generations of families who lived, worked, and dreamed in this place, shaping one of South Asia's earliest settled landscapes. Chiran reminds us that civilization in India did not emerge suddenly with cities and empires, but grew slowly through experimentation, cooperation, and adaptation within fertile river systems. It stands as a powerful example of how early communities laid the foundations for later cultural traditions that would shape the subcontinent for millennia. Burzahum and the life beneath the earth. In the high valleys of Kashmir, where snow-covered mountains surround wide grasslands and cold winds sweep down from the Himalayas, there lies the archaeological site of Burzahum, a place that preserves one of the most unusual and innovative forms of prehistoric living in South Asia, where early communities chose to build their homes, not above the ground, but beneath it, creating deep pit dwellings that protected them from harsh climates and reflected remarkable environmental intelligence. Located near the banks of the Jhelum River, Burzahum was inhabited from around 3000 BCE to 1500 BCE, during a period when climatic conditions in the Himalayan region were often severe, with long winters, heavy snowfall, and dramatic temperature fluctuations that made conventional surface housing difficult to maintain. To survive in this environment, Burzahum's inhabitants developed a unique architectural solution by excavating circular and oval pits into the ground, lining them with clay, stone, and wooden posts, and covering them with thatched or wooden roofs supported by central pillars, creating semi-subterranean homes that retained heat in winter and remained cool in summer. These pit dwellings ranged in size and depth, with some large enough to accommodate extended families, storage areas, and workspaces, while smaller pits may have served as specialized structures for food preservation, tool production, or ritual activities. Access to these homes was typically provided by ladders or steps carved into the pit walls, indicating careful planning of movement and safety within confined spaces. Inside the pits, archaeologists have discovered hearths, ash deposits, stone tools, bone implements, and pottery fragments, offering detailed insight into domestic life, food preparation, and craft activities. Evidence suggests that inhabitants cooked over open fires, dried meat and fish for storage, wove plant fibers into textiles, and produced hunting and farming tools adapted to mountainous terrain. Burzaham's economy combined agriculture, pastoralism, and hunting, reflecting a flexible subsistence strategy suited to unpredictable environmental conditions. Inhabitants cultivated wheat and barley in nearby valleys, raised cattle, sheep, and goats, and hunted deer, wild sheep, and other mountain animals, integrating multiple food sources to reduce risk. One of the most distinctive features of Burzahum is its burial practices, which included interring humans alongside animals, particularly dogs, suggesting complex symbolic relationships between people and animals, possibly reflecting beliefs about protection, companionship, and spiritual guidance in the afterlife. Some burials also contained pottery, tools, and ornaments, indicating concepts of social identity and continuity beyond death. Stone tools found at Burzahum show gradual technological development, transitioning from simple chipped implements to more refined polished tools and later copper objects, reflecting increasing interaction with surrounding regions and technological exchange. Trade networks connected Burzahum to the Indus Valley, Central Asia, and Himalayan trade routes, as evidenced by non-local materials and stylistic influences. Environmental studies reveal that Burzaham's inhabitants carefully managed natural resources, using forest products, river systems, and grazing lands sustainably to support long-term settlement. They adapted construction techniques, clothing, and food storage methods to cope with cold winters and seasonal isolation. Over time, pit-dwelling traditions gradually gave way to surface housing as climate conditions stabilized and social structures evolved, marking a transition toward more open settlement patterns and increased regional integration. Despite these changes, Burzahum remained an important cultural center that influenced surrounding communities for centuries. Modern archaeological research using stratigraphic excavation, paleo-environmental analysis, and microscopic residue studies continues to uncover new information about life at Burzahum. Yet many questions remain unanswered. How leadership was organized, how knowledge was transmitted, how rituals were conducted, and how communities balanced mobility with permanent settlement. Walking among the remains today, visitors can see circular depressions in the ground that once sheltered families from Himalayan winters, silent reminders of human ingenuity and resilience. Burzahum demonstrates that early civilizations did not follow a single path toward urbanization and monument building, but developed diverse solutions shaped by local environments and cultural traditions. It stands as a powerful example of how human creativity and adaptation allowed communities to thrive, even in some of the most challenging landscapes on Earth. Rahman and the birth of planned urban life. On the wide plains of northwestern Pakistan, near the foothills of the Sulaiman Mountains, where seasonal rivers flow down toward the Indus Basin and fertile soils support early agriculture, there lies the archaeological site of Rahman, a settlement that preserves one of the earliest and clearest examples of planned urban life in South Asia, revealing how prehistoric communities began transforming scattered villages into organized towns built according to deliberate architectural and social principles. Located in present-day Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Rahman flourished between approximately 3,300 and 2,600 BCE, during the period when farming societies across the Indus region were becoming increasingly complex and interconnected, laying the foundations for what would later develop into the great cities of the Indus Valley civilization. Unlike earlier settlements that grew organically without clear structure, Rahman was carefully laid out according to a grid-like plan, with straight streets, defined residential blocks, drainage channels, and designated public spaces, indicating advanced planning and centralized coordination. This level of organization suggests that community leaders possessed both technical knowledge and social authority to guide long-term development. The town was surrounded by a massive mud brick wall reinforced with towers and gateways, providing protection against flooding, wild animals, and potential conflict, while also symbolizing territorial identity and collective strength. Inside the walls, Houses were built using standardized mud bricks made from clay, straw, and water, molded into uniform shapes and sun-dried before construction, reflecting early experimentation with mass production techniques and quality control. These bricks were arranged in strong patterns that distributed weight evenly and improved resistance to erosion, showing sophisticated understanding of building materials. Residential buildings typically included multiple rooms arranged around small courtyards, with separate spaces for cooking, sleeping, storage, and craft production, indicating concern for privacy, hygiene, and household efficiency. Many homes were equipped with drainage systems, wells, and waste disposal channels, demonstrating early attention to public health and environmental management. Archaeological excavations have uncovered pottery workshops, bead-making areas, metalworking spaces, and storage facilities within Raymond Dairy, revealing a diversified economy supported by specialized crafts and coordinated production. Beads made from carnelian, shell, and semi-precious stones indicate participation in long-distance trade networks that extended across South Asia and into Central Asia and the Persian Gulf. Agriculture formed the economic backbone of the settlement, with inhabitants cultivating wheat, barley, and legumes, while raising cattle, sheep, and goats, supported by irrigation systems and seasonal water management techniques. Surplus food production enabled population growth and freed labor for construction, administration, and specialized crafts. Social organization at Raymond Dairy appears to have been increasingly formalized, with evidence of administrative control, standardized construction, and regulated production suggesting early forms of governance and institutional authority. Although writing had not yet fully developed, seal impressions, weight systems, and consistent architectural standards indicate emerging bureaucratic practices. Burial customs and material distribution patterns suggest rising social differentiation, with some individuals enjoying greater access to valuable goods and prominent housing locations. However, extreme inequality had not yet developed, reflecting a transitional stage between village-based egalitarianism and later urban stratification. Environmental and climatic changes, combined with shifting trade routes and regional reorganization, eventually contributed to Raymond Dairy's decline around 2600 BCE, as populations moved toward larger urban centers such as Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. Rather than disappearing entirely, its traditions were absorbed into the expanding Indus civilization. Modern archaeological research using geophysical surveys, microscopic material analysis, and digital reconstruction continues to reveal new aspects of Raymond Dairy's development, yet many important questions remain unresolved. How authority was exercised, how disputes were resolved, how planning decisions were made, and how technical knowledge was preserved. Walking through the excavated streets today, visitors can still follow the outlines of ancient neighborhoods and drainage systems, gaining rare insight into how early urban communities functioned on a daily basis. Raymond Dairy demonstrates that cities did not emerge suddenly through royal decree, but evolved, gradually through experimentation, cooperation, and shared problem-solving. It represents one of humanity's earliest efforts to organize space, resources, and social life into a coherent urban system, laying essential foundations for later civilizations across South Asia. Basta and the art of living on stone terraces. In the rugged highlands of southern Jordan, where steep limestone hills rise above narrow valleys and seasonal streams cut through rocky terrain, there lies the Neolithic settlement of Basta, a remarkable early town that demonstrates how prehistoric communities learned to adapt architecture, social organization, and daily life to some of the most challenging landscapes in the Near East, transforming unstable slopes into stable living environments through careful planning and collective effort. Situated at an elevation of more than 1,000 meters above sea level, Basta was inhabited between approximately 7,000 and 6,500 BCE, during the pre-pottery Neolithic B period, a time when farming communities across the Levant were rapidly expanding, experimenting with new construction techniques, and developing increasingly complex social systems. Unlike settlements built on flat plains or river valleys, Basta was established on a steep, hillside where natural terrain offered little level ground for construction, forcing its inhabitants to reshape the landscape itself in order to create usable space. To solve this problem, the builders constructed a series of massive stone retaining walls that supported artificial terraces, creating flat platforms on which houses, pathways, and communal spaces could be built. These terraces were not small or temporary features, but large engineered structures requiring thousands of tons of stone to be quarried, transported, and carefully positioned, demonstrating advanced understanding of slope stability, water drainage, and load distribution. On these platforms, inhabitants built rectangular stone houses with plastered floors and walls, arranged in dense clusters connected by narrow passageways and stairways that followed the contours of the hillside. This layout created a compact urban environment in which homes, storage areas, workshops, and communal spaces were closely integrated, encouraging cooperation, social interaction, and shared responsibility. Inside the houses, archaeologists have found hearths, grinding stones, storage bins, and work surfaces, revealing how families processed grain, prepared food, crafted tools, and managed household economies within limited space. Agriculture formed the economic foundation of Basta, with inhabitants cultivating wheat, barley, and legumes on nearby terraces and valley floors, while raising goats and sheep in surrounding grazing areas, combining farming and pastoralism to ensure food security. Water management was a central concern, as rainfall was irregular and springs were limited, leading residents to develop systems for collecting, channeling, and conserving rainwater for domestic and agricultural use. Basta's inhabitants also participated in regional trade networks that linked them to other Neolithic communities across Jordan, Israel, and the wider Levant, as evidenced by the presence of obsidian, exotic stones, shells, and distinctive pottery styles. These connections facilitated the exchange of technologies, architectural ideas, and social practices, contributing to cultural continuity across large territories. Social organization at Basta appears to have been highly cooperative, as maintaining terraces, pathways, and water systems required constant collective labor and coordination, suggesting that leadership roles were closely tied to practical skills and community trust rather than formal authority. Burial practices and symbolic objects indicate beliefs centered on ancestry, fertility, and landscape spirituality, reflecting close relationships between people, land, and natural forces. Environmental studies show that Basta's residents possess detailed ecological knowledge, allowing them to manage soil erosion, vegetation cover, and grazing patterns in ways that sustained productivity over centuries. Despite these adaptations, changing climate conditions, resource pressures, and shifting settlement patterns eventually led to the site's abandonment around 6,500 BCE, as populations moved toward more favorable environments. Rather than collapsing abruptly, Basta gradually declined as families relocated, carrying their architectural knowledge and social traditions to new communities. Modern archaeological research using remote sensing, geoarchaeology, and microstratigraphic analysis continues to reveal new details about construction techniques and daily life, yet many questions remain unanswered. How leadership was maintained, how labor was organized, how conflicts were resolved, and how technical knowledge was transmitted. Walking among the terraced ruins today, visitors can still trace the outlines of ancient platforms and stone walls that once supported vibrant neighborhoods high above the valley floor. Basta demonstrates that early urban life was not limited to fertile plains and river valleys, but could also flourish in rugged landscapes through ingenuity, cooperation, and environmental understanding. It stands as a powerful example of how prehistoric communities reshaped difficult terrain into stable, sustainable living spaces, laying foundations for later mountain settlements across the Near East. Perdigones and the circles of community and power. In the rolling plains of southern Portugal, near the modern town of Reguengos de Monsaraz, where cork oak forests, open fields, and gentle hills stretch toward the distant Guadiana River, there lies a vast and carefully organized prehistoric complex known as Perdigones, a place where early farming communities gathered for ceremonies, trade, burial, and political negotiation within a landscape shaped by concentric circular enclosures. Occupied primarily between approximately 3400 and 2000 BCE, during the late Neolithic and Copper Age periods, Perdigones developed at a time when societies across Iberia were becoming increasingly complex, interconnected, and socially differentiated, requiring new forms of cooperation, communication, and symbolic expression. Unlike permanent residential towns such as Los Millares or Rahmanderi, Perdigones functioned primarily as a large regional gathering center rather than a densely inhabited settlement, serving as a focal point where dispersed communities periodically assembled to conduct rituals, exchange goods, resolve conflicts, and reinforce shared identities. The heart of the site consists of multiple concentric ditches and embankments forming circular and oval enclosures that extend across several hectares, creating a layered architectural landscape that controlled movement, visibility, and access. These ditches were excavated using stone and bone tools, requiring enormous labor investment and careful planning to achieve consistent depth, curvature, and alignment, reflecting coordinated community effort across generations. Archaeological studies show that the enclosures were constructed and modified in phases, with new rings added over time, indicating evolving social needs, ritual practices, and political relationships. Entrances were carefully positioned to regulate movement and create controlled pathways into central spaces, suggesting that access was structured and possibly restricted during certain events. Within and around the enclosures, archaeologists have discovered burial pits, ceremonial deposits, feasting remains, pottery assemblages, and exotic artifacts, indicating that Perdigones served as a major ritual and social hub where life cycle ceremonies, seasonal festivals, and intergroup negotiations took place. Human remains found at the site include both local individuals and people originating from distant regions, as shown by isotopic analysis, demonstrating that Perdigones attracted participants from across large areas of the Iberian Peninsula. One of the most remarkable aspects of Perdigones is its astronomical orientation, as several enclosure features align with solar and lunar events, particularly solstices and major lunar standstills, suggesting that celestial observation played an important role in structuring ritual calendars and social gatherings. These alignments required long-term observation and transmission of astronomical knowledge within specialist groups. Trade networks converged at Perdigones, bringing in copper objects, ivory, amber, marine shells, and fine ceramics from distant regions, transforming the site into an important economic exchange center as well as a ceremonial space. These materials were often deposited in ritual contexts rather than used domestically, highlighting their symbolic value in reinforcing alliances and social status. Social organization at Perdigones appears to have involved multiple interacting communities rather than a single centralized authority, with leadership likely emerging through ritual expertise, negotiation skills, and control over exchange networks. The site functioned as a neutral meeting ground where cooperation and competition were balanced through structured ceremonies and shared traditions. Environmental studies indicate that the surrounding landscape supported intensive farming, herding, and woodland management, providing the economic foundation for periodic large-scale gatherings that could last for weeks or months. Food production, storage, and distribution were carefully coordinated to support these events. Over time, changing social dynamics, economic reorganization, and regional transformations reduced Perdigones' central role, leading to its gradual abandonment around 2000 BCE as new political centers and settlement patterns emerged. Despite this decline, the site remained embedded in cultural memory and was respected by later communities. Modern archaeological research using geophysical survey, radiocarbon dating, isotopic analysis, and landscape modeling continues to uncover new details about Perdigones' development and function. Yet many important questions remain unresolved. How decisions were made, how conflicts were managed, how rituals were coordinated, and how authority was negotiated. Walking across the low ridges and shallow ditches today, visitors can still trace the outlines of ancient circles that once enclosed thousands of people gathered for shared purpose. Perdigones demonstrates that early complex societies did not rely solely on cities and fortresses, but also created neutral ceremonial spaces where cooperation, identity, and power were negotiated through ritual and architecture. It stands as a powerful example of how prehistoric communities used geometry, landscape, and collective memory to shape social life long before formal states and institutions emerged. Bandiagara and the granaries in the sky. Along the dramatic sandstone escarpment of Bandiagara in central Mali, where towering cliffs rise abruptly from wide savanna plains and stretch for more than 150 kilometers across the landscape, there exists one of the most visually striking and culturally rich human settlements in Africa, a place where communities learn to live in close partnership with stone, height, and gravity, building homes, shrines, and storage structures directly into vertical rock faces, creating what appear today as granaries suspended in the sky. The Bandiagara escarpment has been inhabited for more than 2,000 years, with archaeological evidence indicating occupation by several successive cultures, most notably the Telam, and later the Dogon people, who developed highly specialized architectural traditions adapted to this rugged environment. The earliest known inhabitants, known as the Telam, settled along the cliffs between approximately the 11th and 16th centuries CE, choosing locations that offered natural protection from enemies, wild animals, and environmental extremes. They constructed small rectangular granaries, burial chambers, and living spaces in narrow ledges and cavities high above the valley floor, often in places that seem nearly inaccessible even with modern climbing equipment. These structures were built using mud brick, stone, and wooden beams, carefully anchored into rock surfaces and reinforced to withstand wind, rain, and temperature fluctuations. The placement of granaries at great heights served multiple purposes, protecting stored grain from floods, rodents, insects, and theft, while also symbolizing control over resources and social stability. Climbing to these storage spaces required skill, strength, and specialized equipment, suggesting that access was restricted and regulated by community norms and authority structures. When the Dogon people migrated into the region around the 14th and 15th centuries, they adopted and expanded upon many Telam architectural practices, integrating cliffside structures into their own complex system of villages, rituals, and social organization. The Dogon developed terraced settlements at the base and top of the escarpment, linking them to cliff granaries through networks of paths, ladders, and climbing routes that formed an integrated vertical landscape. Agriculture formed the foundation of life in the Bandiagara region, with inhabitants cultivating millet, sorghum, and onions on carefully managed terraces and valley fields, while raising livestock such as goats, sheep, and chickens. Given the region's unpredictable rainfall and periodic droughts, secure food storage was essential for survival, making cliff granaries a critical component of economic resilience. Religious and symbolic meanings were deeply embedded in Bandiagara architecture, as granaries and shrines were often associated with ancestral spirits, fertility rituals, and cosmological beliefs that linked earth, sky, and human society. Many structures were decorated with symbolic motifs and used in ceremonies that reinforced social cohesion and moral order. Social organization among the Dogon was based on extended families, age groups, and ritual associations, with elders and spiritual specialists playing key roles in regulating access to resources and overseeing communal activities. Granary ownership and management reflected household status, lineage affiliation, and social responsibility. Trade networks connected Bandiagara communities with regional markets across the Sahel and Niger River basin, facilitating exchange of grain, cloth, metals, and craft products, and contributing to economic diversification. These connections also transmitted ideas, religious practices, and artistic traditions. Environmental studies show that Dogon farmers developed sophisticated soil conservation techniques, crop rotation systems, and water management practices to maintain productivity on fragile slopes and in dry valleys. Stone walls, mulch layers, and contour farming reduced erosion and retained moisture, allowing agriculture to persist for centuries. Over time, Political changes, colonial interventions, and economic pressures altered traditional lifeways, leading many families to relocate to lowland towns and urban centers. Yet cliff structures remained powerful symbols of ancestral identity and cultural continuity. Modern archaeological research, architectural surveys, and ethnographic studies continue to document Bandiagara's unique heritage, revealing how built environments reflect deep relationships between culture, environment, and belief. Many questions remain unanswered. How early telem builders reached such high locations, how construction techniques were transmitted, how labor was organized, and how rituals shaped architectural decisions. Walking beneath the cliffs today, visitors can look upward at rows of tiny granaries clinging to sheer rock faces, silent witnesses to centuries of ingenuity, resilience, and spiritual life. Bandiagara demonstrates that human architecture is not limited by flat ground or easy access, but can flourish in vertical landscapes through creativity, cooperation, and deep environmental understanding. It stands as one of the world's most remarkable examples of how societies transform extreme terrain into sustainable cultural landscapes. Mehrgarh and the origins of South Asian civilization. On the wide plains at the foot of the Bolan Pass in present-day Balochistan, Pakistan, where mountain corridors connect Central Asia with the Indus Valley and seasonal rivers nourish fertile patches of land in an otherwise arid environment. There lies the archaeological site of Mehrgarh, one of the most important prehistoric settlements in the world, preserving a continuous record of human development from early farming villages to the foundations of urban civilization in South Asia. Occupied from approximately 7000 BCE to 2600 BCE, Mehrgarh represents one of the earliest known centers of agriculture and settled life outside the Fertile Crescent, demonstrating that farming, animal domestication, and complex social organization emerged independently in multiple regions of the ancient world. When the first settlers arrived at Mehrgarh, they were transitioning from hunting and gathering toward food production, cultivating wheat and barley and domesticating cattle, sheep, and goats, creating stable subsistence systems that allowed permanent settlement and population growth. These early inhabitants built simple mud brick houses arranged in small clusters with storage rooms, courtyards, and workspaces that supported daily activities such as food processing, tool making, and textile production. Over time, architecture became more sophisticated, with standardized brick sizes, multi-room dwellings, and organized neighborhoods reflecting increasing planning and social coordination. Excavations have revealed extensive evidence of craft specialization at Mehrgarh, including bead-making workshops, pottery kilns, copper smelting areas, and shell working stations, indicating that skilled artisans produced goods not only for local use, but also for regional exchange. Beads made from carnelian, lapis lazuli, turquoise, and shell demonstrate participation in long-distance trade networks linking Mehrgarh to Afghanistan, Central Asia, and coastal regions. One of the most remarkable discoveries at Mehrgarh is evidence of early medical practices, including drilled human teeth showing signs of therapeutic treatment, suggesting that inhabitants possessed practical knowledge of dentistry and healthcare thousands of years before formal medicine developed. Burial practices at Mehrgarh also reveal complex social and spiritual beliefs, as graves often contained pottery, ornaments, tools, and animal offerings, indicating concepts of status, identity, and life beyond death. Some burials display greater wealth than others, reflecting emerging social differentiation within the community. Agriculture at Mehrgarh was supported by irrigation systems, seasonal water management, and soil conservation techniques that enabled farmers to maintain productivity in semi-arid conditions. Crop diversity and livestock management strategies reduced vulnerability to drought and environmental fluctuations. Social organization evolved gradually from kin-based groups into more complex structures involving leadership roles, economic coordination, and ritual authority, laying foundations for later urban institutions. Standardized construction methods, craft regulation, and shared symbolic traditions suggest increasing institutionalization. Mehrgarh's strategic location near major trade routes made it a key intermediary between highland and lowland regions, facilitating the spread of technologies, crops, and cultural practices into the Indus Valley. Many scholars view Mehrgarh as a direct ancestor of later Indus cities such as Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, which inherited its agricultural base, craft traditions, and social organization. Around 2600 BCE, population centers shifted toward emerging urban hubs in the Indus Plains, leading to the gradual decline of Mehrgarh as a major settlement. Rather than disappearing abruptly, its inhabitants relocated and integrated into new urban networks. Modern archaeological research using radiocarbon dating, bioarchaeology, and material science continues to refine understanding of Mehrgarh's development, yet many questions remain unanswered. How authority was exercised, how knowledge was transmitted, how economic systems were regulated, and how innovation was sustained over thousands of years. Walking among Mehrgarh's excavated remains today, visitors encounter layers of mud brick walls, hearths, workshops, and burial grounds that testify to generations of experimentation, cooperation, and adaptation. Mehrgarh demonstrates that civilization in South Asia did not begin suddenly with large cities, but emerged slowly through millennia of learning, planning, and shared effort. It stands as one of humanity's earliest laboratories of social and technological development, where the foundations of later urban life were patiently constructed over thousands of years. Newgrange and the architecture of light and time. On the gentle hills of the Boyne Valley in eastern Ireland, where the River Boyne curves slowly through fertile farmland and morning mist often rises from the water, there stands a massive circular mound that appears at first glance to be a natural hill. Yet beneath this grassy surface lies one of the most extraordinary prehistoric monuments ever built, a structure older than the pyramids of Egypt and Stonehenge, known today as Newgrange. Constructed around 3200 BCE during the Neolithic period, Newgrange represents one of humanity's earliest and most sophisticated attempts to combine architecture, astronomy, engineering, and spiritual belief into a single unified structure designed to last for thousands of years. The builders of Newgrange were farming communities who lived in small villages scattered across the Boyne Valley, cultivating wheat and barley, raising cattle and sheep, and relying on the fertile river basin for survival. Yet despite their simple material culture, they possessed deep knowledge of stone construction, landscape planning, and celestial observation. The monument itself consists of a huge circular mound more than 80 meters in diameter and 13 meters high, constructed from layers of earth, stone, and clay, reinforced by a ring of massive curbstones at its base, many of which are decorated with intricate spiral and geometric carvings whose meanings remain debated to this day. These carvings were created using stone tools and patient craftsmanship, reflecting symbolic traditions that were passed down through generations and embedded into the fabric of the monument. At the center of the mound lies a long stone passage leading to a cruciform burial chamber with 3 side recesses and a central basin stone, forming a carefully designed interior space that controlled movement, sound, light, and atmosphere. The passage is constructed from enormous stone slabs placed with extraordinary precision, forming stable walls and ceilings that have remained intact for more than 5,000 years despite Ireland's wet climate and frequent temperature changes. One of Newgrange's most remarkable features is its alignment with the winter solstice sunrise, when, for a few minutes on the shortest days of the year, sunlight enters through a specially designed roof box above the entrance and travels down the passage to illuminate the central chamber. This phenomenon required decades of observation and careful calculation, as even a small error in alignment would have prevented the effect, demonstrating that Neolithic builders possessed advanced understanding of solar movement and seasonal cycles. For the people who constructed Newgrange, this annual event symbolized rebirth, renewal, and the triumph of light over darkness, reinforcing beliefs about life, death, and cosmic order. Archaeological excavations inside Newgrange have uncovered human remains, beads, pendants, stone tools, and ritual objects, indicating that the monument served as a collective burial site and ceremonial center for elite members of the community. The arrangement of remains suggests complex mortuary practices involving repeated visits, offerings, and ritual performances rather than simple burial. The white quartz facade and dark granite stones used in Newgrange's exterior were transported from distant locations, some more than 50 kilometers away, requiring organized labor, logistical planning, and coordinated effort across multiple communities. This level of cooperation indicates strong leadership structures and shared spiritual motivation. Newgrange formed part of a wider sacred landscape in the Boyne Valley that includes Noath and Douth, creating a coordinated ritual complex linked by astronomical alignments, ceremonial pathways, and social networks. Together, these monuments reveal long-term planning across generations and a shared religious worldview. Social organization among Newgrange's builders appears to have been hierarchical, with certain families or ritual specialists controlling access to sacred spaces and overseeing ceremonies. Differences in burial goods and monument placement suggest emerging elite status within Neolithic society. Over time, as cultural traditions evolved, Newgrange lost its original religious function, yet it remained embedded in folklore and local memory as a place of supernatural power, associated with mythical figures, hidden worlds, and ancient gods. These traditions helped preserve the site through centuries of political and cultural change. Modern archaeological research using laser scanning, material analysis, and astronomical modeling continues to refine understanding of Newgrange's construction and use. Yet many questions remain unanswered. How knowledge was transmitted, how labor was coordinated, how rituals were performed, and how authority was maintained. Walking through the narrow passage today, as light slowly fades and stone walls close in, visitors experience the same controlled sensory environment that Neolithic builders intended, creating a powerful connection between past and present. Newgrange demonstrates that early humans were not merely surviving, but thinking deeply about time, memory, and cosmic order, using architecture to express ideas that still resonate thousands of years later. It stands as one of humanity's greatest early achievements, showing how imagination, observation, and cooperation could transform stone and earth into a monument that measures not only space, but eternity. Douth and the Shadowed Path of the Sun. On the northern bank of the River Boyne in Eastern Ireland, standing quietly beside its more famous neighbour Newgrange, there rises another massive prehistoric mound that for centuries remained overlooked and misunderstood, yet holds within it some of the deepest mysteries of Neolithic Europe, a place where stone, darkness, and fading sunlight were shaped into a powerful expression of ancient belief, known today as the Douth Passage Tomb. Constructed around 3200 BCE, during the same cultural period as Newgrange and Noath, Douth forms part of the great Brú na Bóinne ritual landscape, a sacred complex designed by early farming communities who understood how to blend architecture, astronomy, and symbolism into enduring monuments. From the outside, Douth appears as a large grass-covered mound surrounded by curbstones decorated with spirals, circles, zigzags, and abstract motifs carved into hard stone using simple tools and extraordinary patience. These carvings were not merely decorative, but formed a visual language connected to cycles of nature, spiritual transformation, and ancestral memory. Unlike Newgrange, which celebrates the return of light at midwinter, Douth is associated with the setting sun, particularly during the winter solstice, when sunlight enters parts of its western passage and briefly illuminates the interior chamber as daylight fades from the world. This alignment reflects a complementary relationship between birth and death, light and darkness, beginning and ending, suggesting that the Boyne Valley monuments were designed as parts of a unified cosmological system. Douth contains two main stone passages leading to separate chambers, both constructed from massive slabs fitted together with remarkable precision, forming stable structures that have survived for more than 5,000 years. The builders carefully selected and positioned each stone to support weight, prevent collapse, and control interior space, demonstrating advanced engineering knowledge. Inside the chambers, large basin stones and recessed alcoves indicate ritual activity involving offerings, cremated remains, and symbolic objects, reflecting complex mortuary practices centered on ancestor veneration and spiritual continuity. Archaeological evidence suggests that Douth was used repeatedly over long periods, with ceremonies, burials, and communal gatherings reinforcing social bonds and shared beliefs. The curbstones surrounding Douth are among the most richly decorated in the Boyne Valley, displaying some of the finest examples of Neolithic rock art in Europe. Many motifs appear to reflect solar paths, lunar cycles, and natural rhythms, suggesting that astronomical observation was deeply integrated into artistic expression. Construction of Douth required enormous collective effort, including quarrying, transporting, and positioning thousands of tons of stone and earth, as well as coordinating labor across multiple generations. This level of organization indicates strong leadership, shared ideology, and sophisticated social structures. Over time, Douth suffered damage and neglect, particularly during the medieval period when parts of the mound were disturbed in search of treasure, leading to partial collapse and loss of archaeological context. Despite this, much of its original structure remains intact, preserving vital evidence of prehistoric craftsmanship. Unlike Newgrange, which was carefully restored in the 20th century, Douth remains largely unexcavated, allowing many of its secrets to remain buried beneath layers of soil and stone. This has made it a focus of ongoing scientific study and debate. Modern researchers use geophysical surveys, remote sensing, and non-invasive imaging to explore Douth's hidden chambers and structural features without disturbing its fragile interior. These methods continue to reveal new insights into construction phases, internal layouts, and ritual functions. Yet many questions remain unanswered. How ceremonies were conducted, how knowledge was passed between generations, how spiritual authority was maintained, and how these monuments shaped everyday life. Walking around Douth today, visitors experience a quieter, more contemplative atmosphere than at Newgrange, as if the site still preserves its ancient connection to shadow, silence, and the ending of cycles. The mound stands as a reminder that prehistoric spirituality embraced both light and darkness, beginnings and endings, hope and loss. Douth demonstrates that early societies did not build monuments randomly, but carefully designed sacred landscapes that reflected deep understanding of time, space, and human existence. It represents the shadowed counterpart to Newgrange's brilliance, completing a vision of the universe carved in stone by people who saw their lives as part of an eternal rhythm. The Ring of Brodgar and the Geometry of Sacred Space. In the heart of the Orkney Islands off the northern coast of Scotland, where cold Atlantic winds sweep across open moorland and narrow strips of land connect shimmering lochs to the sea, there stands a vast circle of stone that has watched over this remote landscape for more than 4,000 years, a monument that transforms empty space into sacred ground through precision, symmetry, and collective memory, known today as the Ring of Brodgar. Constructed between approximately 2500 and 2000 BCE during the late Neolithic period, the Ring of Brodgar formed part of one of Europe's most important prehistoric ritual landscapes, alongside the stones of Stennis, Maeshowe, and nearby settlement sites, creating an interconnected network of ceremonial, residential, and funerary monuments. Unlike burial mounds such as Newgrange and Douth, the Ring of Brodgar was an open-air monument, designed not to enclose the dead, but to gather the living, serving as a space for ceremonies, assemblies, and social negotiation within a carefully controlled architectural setting. The circle originally consisted of around 60 standing stones arranged in a near-perfect ring more than 100 meters in diameter, making it one of the largest stone circles ever constructed in Britain. Today, 27 stones remain standing, yet their original arrangement can still be traced through archaeological surveys and excavation. Each stone was quarried from local sandstone, shaped using stone tools, and transported across uneven terrain to the site, requiring coordinated labor, technical skill, and careful planning. Some stones weigh several tons and rise more than 4 meters high, yet they were positioned with remarkable accuracy, forming a smooth circular outline visible from surrounding hills. Surrounding the circle is a massive rock-cut ditch up to 3 meters deep and 10 meters wide, excavated using stone and bone tools, representing an extraordinary investment of time and energy for a monument with no defensive function. This ditch served to separate sacred space from ordinary landscape, reinforcing the symbolic boundary between ritual activity and everyday life. Entrances to the circle were carefully placed, controlling movement and guiding participants along specific paths during ceremonies, creating choreographed experiences that combined motion, sound, and visual perspective. These design elements suggest that rituals at Brodgar were carefully planned and socially regulated. Archaeological evidence indicates that the site was used for large-scale gatherings involving feasting, exchange, performance, and political negotiation, bringing together communities from across Orkney and possibly beyond. Animal bones, pottery fragments, and hearth remains revealed that people travelled long distances to participate in events held at the circle. Astronomical alignments are also associated with the rings of Brodgar, as sightlines connect it with nearby monuments and natural features aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and lunar cycles. These alignments reflect deep understanding of celestial patterns and their integration into ceremonial calendars. The monument's placement between the freshwater loch of Harray and the saltwater loch of Stennis may have held symbolic meaning, representing transitions between worlds, states of being, or spiritual realms. Water, land, and sky were brought together within a unified sacred landscape. Social organization behind Brodgar's construction required cooperation across multiple settlements, with leadership based on ritual authority, technical expertise, and negotiation skills rather than centralized political power. The project likely unfolded over generations, with knowledge passed orally and practically through apprenticeship and communal participation. Over time, changing cultural traditions and social structures reduced the importance of stone circles, leading to Brodgar's gradual abandonment around 1800 BCE. Later communities respected the site, preserving its stones within folklore and local memory. Modern archaeological research using laser scanning, geophysical survey, and landscape analysis continues to reveal new information about construction methods, usage patterns, and symbolic meanings. Yet many questions remain unresolved. How ceremonies were structured, how disputes were mediated, how leadership was maintained, and how sacred knowledge was transmitted. Standing within the circle today, surrounded by open sky and distant horizons, visitors experience the same sense of enclosure without walls that Neolithic builders intentionally created. The stones frame the landscape, focusing attention inward while connecting participants to wider natural cycles. The Ring of Brodgar demonstrates that prehistoric societies possessed sophisticated concepts of geometry, space, and symbolism, using stone to shape social relationships and spiritual experiences. It stands as a testament to humanity's early ability to transform empty land into meaningful place, creating monuments that continue to inspire wonder thousands of years later. Mai Shoei and the mastery of stone and shadow. In the wide open heart of Orkney's mainland, where rolling grasslands meet distant seas and northern light shifts constantly across the horizon, there stands a large grass-covered mound that appears simple from the outside, yet hides within it one of the most perfectly engineered prehistoric chambers ever constructed in Europe, a monument that combines precision, astronomy, symbolism, and craftsmanship into a single enduring masterpiece, known today as Mai Shoei. Built around 2800 BCE during the late Neolithic period, Mai Shoei belongs to the same sacred landscape as the Ring of Brodgar and the Stones of Stennis, forming part of an integrated ceremonial and social system that shaped life in Orkney for centuries. At first glance, Mai Shoei looks like a natural hill rising gently from the surrounding fields, but beneath this surface lies a carefully constructed stone chamber connected to the outside world by a narrow, low passage more than 10 meters long, designed to control movement, light, and atmosphere. The passage slopes slightly upward toward the chamber, creating a subtle psychological transition from the ordinary world into a carefully protected sacred interior. Inside, visitors enter a large central chamber built from massive sandstone slabs stacked in a corbelled formation, where each successive layer projects slightly inward, gradually narrowing until the roof closes in a self-supporting stone dome. This technique distributes weight evenly and prevents collapse, allowing the chamber to remain stable for more than 5,000 years despite Orkney's harsh climate. 3 side cells open from the central chamber, forming a symmetrical layout that reflects careful planning and symbolic balance. These cells likely held human remains, ritual objects, and ceremonial offerings, although much of their original contents have been disturbed over time. One of Maisho's most extraordinary features is its alignment with the winter solstice sunset, when sunlight enters the passage and floods the chamber with golden light for several minutes, illuminating the back wall and transforming the dark interior into a glowing sacred space. This alignment required precise observation of solar movement over many years and careful architectural calculation. For Neolithic communities, this annual event symbolized renewal, continuity, and cosmic order, reinforcing beliefs about death, rebirth, and ancestral presence. Construction of Maisho required quarrying, shaping, and transporting enormous stone slabs, some weighing several tons, as well as moving thousands of cubic meters of earth to form the mound. This work demanded coordinated labor, technical knowledge, and strong social organization. The monument's builders also demonstrated advanced waterproofing techniques, using clay layers and drainage channels to prevent water infiltration, ensuring long-term preservation. This reflects detailed understanding of local geology and hydrology. Maisho's significance did not end with the Neolithic period. During the Viking Age, Norse explorers broke into the mound and left behind one of the largest collections of runic inscriptions in the world, carving names, stories, and boasts into the stone walls. These inscriptions provide rare insight into medieval attitudes toward ancient monuments and reveal how Maisho continued to inspire awe thousands of years after its construction. Some inscriptions describe treasure hunting, heroic exploits, and romantic adventures, blending myth and reality within the ancient chamber. These later visitors saw Maisho as a place of power, mystery, and hidden wealth. Archaeological evidence suggests that Maisho was part of a broader ceremonial network, connected through sightlines and pathways to surrounding monuments, reinforcing its role as a central node within Orkney's sacred landscape. Its placement and orientation were carefully chosen to integrate land, sky, and sea. Social organization behind Maisho's construction likely involved ritual specialists, skilled builders, and community leaders who coordinated labor and transmitted technical knowledge across generations. Authority was probably rooted in spiritual legitimacy and practical expertise rather than formal political institutions. Modern research using laser scanning, microstratigraphic analysis, and astronomical modeling continues to refine understanding of Maisho's design and function. Yet many important questions remain unanswered. How ceremonies were conducted, how knowledge was preserved, how labor was organized, and how symbolic meanings evolved. Walking through the narrow passage today and emerging into the silent chamber, visitors experience the same carefully engineered sensory transition that Neolithic builders intended, reinforcing the monument's emotional and spiritual impact. Maisho demonstrates that early societies possessed remarkable mastery of stone, space, and light, using architecture to express complex ideas about time, memory, and the cosmos. It stands as one of humanity's greatest prehistoric engineering achievements, a place where mathematics, spirituality, and artistry merged into lasting stones. Gavrinis and the Stone Library of Prehistoric Europe. In the calm waters of the Gulf of Morbihan, on the western coast of France, where small islands rise gently from the Atlantic and tides reshape the shoreline each day, there stands a low, grassy mound on the tiny island of Gavrinis. Hiding within it, one of the most extraordinary collections of prehistoric art and engineering ever created. A monument that preserves in stone the thoughts, beliefs, and technical mastery of Neolithic Europe. Constructed around 3500 BCE, Gavrinis belongs to a wider tradition of passage graves and ceremonial monuments that spread across Brittany, Ireland, and the British Isles, revealing deep cultural connections among early Atlantic societies linked by maritime travel and shared spiritual traditions. From the outside, Gavrinis appears modest, blending naturally into the island landscape. Yet beneath its surface lies a long stone passage leading to a central burial chamber built with exceptional precision and artistic intention. The passage is lined with massive stone slabs, many weighing several tons. carefully shaped and fitted together to form stable walls that have remained intact for more than 5,000 years. What makes Gavrinis truly unique is that nearly every stone inside the passage is covered with intricate carvings, transforming the interior into a continuous gallery of Neolithic art. Spirals, zigzags, chevrons, lozenges, wave patterns, axes, and abstract symbols flow across the stone surfaces, arranged in complex compositions whose meanings remain one of archaeology's greatest puzzles. These carvings were created using stone tools and patient-repeated carving, requiring extraordinary skill, time, and artistic vision. Some motifs appear to represent natural forces such as water, wind, and sunlight, while others may symbolize tools, power, fertility, or spiritual transformation. Together, they form a visual language that was understood by Neolithic communities but has been largely lost to modern interpretation. Recent research has revealed that some of the decorated stones were originally part of earlier monuments, including standing stones and ceremonial structures that were later dismantled and reused at Gavrinis. This practice suggests deliberate recycling of sacred materials, transferring spiritual power and ancestral memory into new constructions. One remarkable example is the ceiling stone of the chamber, which once formed part of a massive standing stone shared with nearby monuments, indicating regional coordination and shared symbolism. Construction of Gavrinis required transporting heavy stones by boat across tidal waters, then hauling them up the island slope and positioning them with millimeter precision, demonstrating advanced logistical planning and maritime skill. This level of organization reflects strong leadership, shared religious motivation, and cooperative labor systems. Inside the chamber, archaeologists have found human remains, pottery, stone tools, and ceremonial objects, indicating that Gavrinis served as both a burial site and a ritual center where communities honored ancestors and conducted spiritual ceremonies. The narrow passage and decorated walls created an immersive sensory environment, where flickering torchlight would animate carvings and cast moving shadows, enhancing ritual experiences. Astronomical elements may also be present at Gavrinis, as some carvings and alignments appear connected to solar and lunar cycles, although these interpretations remain debated. Nevertheless, the integration of art, architecture, and natural light suggests careful consideration of cosmic symbolism. Social organization behind Gavrinis' construction likely involved ritual specialists, master builders, and regional leaders who coordinated resources and transmitted knowledge across generations. The monument's location on an island reinforced its sacred status, separating it physically and symbolically from everyday life. Over time, changing religious traditions and social structures led to Gavrinis' decline in ceremonial importance, yet the site remained respected and avoided destruction, allowing its extraordinary carvings to survive. Modern archaeological research using 3D scanning, digital modeling, and microscopic tool mark analysis continues to uncover new insights into carving techniques, construction sequences, and symbolic patterns. Yet many questions remain unanswered. What the symbols meant, who was allowed inside, how ceremonies were performed, and how knowledge was preserved. Walking through Gavrinis today, visitors encounter walls that seem to speak through patterns and textures, offering silent testimony to minds that sought to record ideas in stone long before writing existed. Gavrinis demonstrates that early European societies were not only skilled builders, but also profound thinkers and artists who used monuments as repositories of memory, belief, and identity. It stands as a prehistoric library, carved not in words, but in symbols, waiting patiently for future generations to unlock its meaning. Ness of Brodgar and the hidden heart of Neolithic Orkney. On a narrow strip of land between the freshwater Loch of Harry and the saltwater Loch of Stennis in Orkney, Scotland, where wind, water, and sky meet in constant motion, there lies one of the most important prehistoric discoveries of the modern era, a vast ceremonial and residential complex that has transformed our understanding of Neolithic society in Northern Europe, known today as the Ness of Brodgar. For thousands of years, this site lay buried beneath farmland, unnoticed and undisturbed, until storms and erosion revealed traces of stone walls at the beginning of the 21st century, leading to excavations that uncovered an extraordinary network of monumental buildings dating from around 3300 to 2300 BCE. Unlike isolated tombs or stone circles, the Ness of Brodgar represents a densely built complex of large stone structures arranged in planned layouts, connected by paved pathways, courtyards, and boundary walls, suggesting that it functioned as a major religious, political, and social centre. The buildings at Ness of Brodgar are remarkable for their scale and quality of construction. Many walls are more than 1 metre thick and built from carefully shaped sandstone blocks fitted tightly together, creating durable structures that have survived millennia of harsh weather. Some buildings cover areas larger than modern houses, indicating communal rather than domestic use. One of the most impressive structures, known as Structure 10, measures more than 25 metres long and appears to have served as a central ceremonial hall. Its walls were decorated with coloured stone, polished surfaces, and carved details, suggesting that visual symbolism and aesthetic impact were essential components of ritual life. Floors were paved with stone slabs, and hearths were placed at central positions, reinforcing social gathering and ceremonial functions. Excavations have revealed thousands of artifacts, including finely decorated pottery, polished stone tools, carved objects, pigments, and animal bones, providing detailed insight into daily life, craft production, and ritual practices. The high quality and uniformity of these objects indicate specialized craftsmanship and centralized coordination. One striking feature of Ness of Brodgar is the deliberate destruction of buildings at the end of their use. Walls were dismantled, floors covered, and large quantities of animal remains and pottery were deposited in what appear to be closing ceremonies, suggesting highly formalized rituals marking the end of social or religious cycles. This behavior reflects sophisticated symbolic systems governing construction, use, and abandonment. The site's location between two locks is believed to have held deep symbolic meaning, representing transitions between freshwater and saltwater, land and sea, life and death, ordinary and sacred realms. This liminal positioning reinforced the site's spiritual importance. Ness of Brodgar was closely connected to nearby monuments such as the Ring of Brodgar, Stones of Stennis, and Maeshowe, forming an integrated ceremonial landscape where movement between sites followed ritual pathways and seasonal rhythms. People likely travelled from across Orkney and beyond to participate in gatherings, feasts, and ceremonies. Social organisation at Ness of Brodgar appears to have been highly structured, with leadership roles linked to ritual authority, construction management, and control of resources. Building and maintaining the complex required coordinated labour and long-term planning. Environmental studies show that inhabitants managed agriculture, fishing, and animal husbandry efficiently to support large populations during ceremonial periods. Surplus food production enabled large-scale feasting and hospitality. Modern archaeological research using digital recording, microscopic analysis, and landscape modelling continues to reveal new insights into the site's development, yet many questions remain unanswered. Who controlled access? How rituals were organised? How knowledge was preserved? And how political power operated? Walking through the exposed foundations today, visitors can trace corridors, thresholds, and gathering spaces where thousands of people once met to negotiate identity, belief, and authority. Ness of Brodgar demonstrates that Neolithic societies were capable of constructing complex institutional centres long before cities and states emerged. It reveals a world where architecture, ritual, and social organisation were deeply intertwined, creating monumental spaces that shaped community life for generations. It stands as the hidden heart of Neolithic Orkney, a place where stone and belief combined to produce one of Europe's earliest ceremonial capitals.